Curtis and Isaiah Colton back here with another live episode of Lead Gen and Lead Conversion Mastery. Some of you are listening to us on our podcast. Some of you are watching us live. And what we're doing right now is we're talking about how to turn your CRM from just leads sitting into a storage bin to a lead gen lead conversion machine. And I think that there's an old way of doing things and a new way of doing things. And last statistic I looked up, about 70% of all real estate professionals say that they struggle with automated follow-up campaigns or maximizing the different tools within their CRM. And I believe that a lot of the reason why that happens is because there's not clear-cut training or a step-by-step process that's given that makes it easy to be able to execute, or easy to give the checklist to somebody else to go execute against if you have a virtual assistant. So our objective here today is to walk you through an outline, a step-by-step outline of how you can have yourself, your team, your virtual assistant go through a process by making sure that you're getting most out of what you already have in your database. And to kind of start off this conversation, what's really important is your database is your most precious asset. We open up the conversation with that. So a quick recap before we get into this. And we kind of give it an analogy as if somebody was going to come by your business, they're going to look at your business and they're going to say, hey, what's going on with your database? What's going on with your book of business? And largely your business will be evaluated on that. And it should be treated the same way, operated daily. Brian, you probably, you coach agents 10, 15, 20 years into the business. And when you share this, a similar formula to this, they probably take a giant gulp and then wish and start calculating in their mind how much money they lost right over the years, right?
Amen.
Yeah. And so we started off talking about making sure that your database is organized by lead source, stage, and triggers. We talked about speed to lead campaigns with CallBridge and CallBridge technology. We showed off how cool CallBridge is, how it can connect you right to the lead instantly. We talked about the importance of having a multi-channel follow-up campaign through speed to lead, because it's not enough just to call them anymore or just to email them anymore. You got to have multi-channel follow-up, and it's got to be automated. And then what we're getting into today is going on to step 4, the importance of having an integrated dialer and integrated manual follow-up, where you can do your follow-up manually from multiple channels. It's kind of where we left off. If you're like, oh man, I wish I was here for the last one, just go listen to the last podcast or go into the private Facebook group and just watch the last video. You can go back to that. That's all, still up there. You can check that out. So Brian, the first question I have for you is one of the things I see people doing, and it's changing slowly, but it still blows my mind how many people have a dialer that they're ripping data from their CRM and they're uploading the data to the dialer, and then they're making the calls, and then that isn't being communicated with their CRM. Could we talk through what is going on with this, right? What's going on with the whole dialer thing?
Yeah, and I can justify sometimes using an outside dialer. Here's the exception. The majority of the CRMs that I've seen do not have multi-line dialers built in. They have single-line dialers built in, and if somebody is really trying to take their business to the next level, 3, 5, 7, 9 lines going out at once is really powerful. Now, I don't think that's why the majority of the people who are watching our show are doing it, though. That is a legitimate reason to do it, because again, most of them are single line dialers. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's not what people are doing. So I think people just haven't bought into the idea of I need to use a dialer inside of my system. And it makes it so easy. For us, I'll go and I'll grab a list, literally hit go, and it just starts dialing the people for you. And, anybody who has a little call apprehension, the beauty of a dialer is it's coming. So, I guess you can stop, but, hit go and then just accept what's happening. And it's funny, agents are really good at that, right? They're really good at handling under that pressure and going for it. They don't necessarily want to go and sit down and grind through it, but if the phone rings, they'll answer it. So, it might actually just be a way to get yourself past call reluctance is load that thing up and hit go and let it go. But I'll tell you something interesting. If you're not using a dialer at all, I think you're missing on a huge opportunity that wasn't as big as it was, say, 5 years ago. 5 years ago, and I keep using these round numbers, we were at approximately a 20% pickup rate, which means if I dial 100 people, I get 20 conversations. Today, I'm at a 7% answer rate. And so I call 100 people and I talk to 7. So literally the majority of the time when you're, I'm going to use air quotes here, lead generating, you're dialing the phone. This is not a skill set, in my opinion. So using a dialer is significantly more effective. I don't know if you've ever done this. I did this one day when I was bored. I made 10 consecutive phone calls with my dialer to dummy leads. They weren't real. The second the person voicemail picked up, I went to the next one. So I didn't leave any voice messages. And I extrapolated that out. And believe it or not, you can call 100 people in an hour, almost exactly to 100 people. It takes 36 seconds for the phone to ring X number of times before it picks up. It'll actually be shorter if anyone sends you to voicemail. So you can call approximately 100 people in an hour if you don't leave a text, or if you don't leave a voicemail, and no one picks up. Now, obviously, the goal is not to see how many people you can dial. It's how many conversations, how many appointments. But, people tell me that I hear this all the time, and I'm sure it makes your head hurt too. How many people are you calling an hour? 20. And I'm like, if I call 20 people an hour, I might not even have a single conversation. So you create efficiency. This is not a problem we had 5, 10, 15 years ago. Now I got to get people to pick up the phone. So I got to call more and more and more and more and more.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a really important conversation to have. It's this finding the balance between quality and quantity. So for an example, we use Ren 360's Conversion IQ, and it has a dialer built in, full transparency, founder of the software. And one of the things that we found is it's got a one-line dialer where you can just put it on what I call a power dialer. So it's just going one number. So you don't actually have to dial, it's just going one number at a time. Then it's got a 3-line, a 5-line, and a 10-line. So you can dial up to 10 lines at one time. What we found though, is the 10-line is almost too much because too many people pick up at one time and there's too many hangups. And so we found that the quality number is that 3 to 5 line dialer seems to be where you get the best. You're dialing enough number to talk to enough people, but it's not compromising the quality of the call because too many people are picking up now. And so I personally recommend either a 3-line or a 5-line, based on my experience of not just working with our dialer, but 10 other dialers in the past, and they all do things a little bit different. And it's funny you mentioned those numbers though, because our sales agents make around on a 3-line dialer, it'll between the conversations they're having, it'll bring them to about 100 calls an hour.
Right, and that's with conversations, so that's with more effective.
Yeah,
I'm talking about no conversations.
Right.
So that's a significant value. And guys, we have to look at small percentages. This is something real estate agents don't do, and they do simultaneously. Like the average person selling a widget, you make $50. If you have one more conversation a day, doesn't change your income. I want those of you listening to this or watching this, think about this. If you have one more good sales conversation a day, that's 5 a week. That's 250 more good sales conversations a year. I don't know what your conversion rate is, but that's got to convert to a heck of a lot of money the way I'm doing math.
It's a big deal. It's a big deal. Yeah.
One a day. One more conversation.
Yeah, and I can't wait to get into some of the numbers and what the differences make when we start calculating all of this stuff coming together and the purpose of it all. But I'm glad you mentioned that, because all these steps lead to one thing: more conversations and more appointments. That's why we're doing all of these things. And so people say, well, it seems like a lot to do. Well, first of all, if you have the right support team and the right people around you, like Brian and myself, to help you, aka you should check out our coaching. It makes it a lot easier to do. Okay. Because you have somebody, I mean, like I know Brian has meticulously done trial and error with us on hundreds of thousands of leads on every single step here. And I have too. And I think it's really cool to be part of a coaching program where, where you not only have people that have been top producers, built teams, but then also taking the time to really drill down and study the nuances of what it takes to run a successful database, because that's where all the money is. And so that's why I love, on a side note, I love training with you, Brian, because there's not too many people you can actually have these, conversations with that have taken the time to really dive into it the way that you have. So I think that just another thing as far as expectations go within a dialer, I know what a lot of people are going to start saying is like, or thinking in their mind is like, how many leads do I need to have to justify paying the cost for a dialer in my database? Because they cost money, right? So like, a decent dialer might cost you $100, $200 a month per seat, right? Somewhere around there. Some of them, they don't charge you per seat, but they charge you per phone call. Sometimes it's a mix, right? And so for us, we try to study everything per 1,000 leads. So like any campaign that we're working, we try to look at it per 1,000 leads. This is kind of an open-ended question, Brian. Maybe it's not a fair question to you, but do you have any insight to like, how do I justify a dialer for my business?
It's actually easy because granted, if your database has 100 people in it, you don't need a dialer. If you have a database of significant size, then you do it. Here would be my question. And can you reasonably, in the amount of time that you have that you've set aside for lead generation, can you reasonably contact the number of people that you need to contact to get to the number of conversations, to get to the number of appointments, to get to the number of closings? Now, I know that's a vague statement I made, but let me just bring back some different numbers. So on my team, we figured out in 2023, for every 22 sales conversations we had a closing. So
wow.
How do we get more closings? Well, it's not rocket science. You don't need a degree in, nuclear science to figure this out. You have more conversations, plain and simple. Right. So now, do we also believe that you can have better conversations and increase that number from 20 or decrease that number from 22 to 21 or 20? Absolutely. But at a minimum, we know that if we just keep having more conversations, we'll do it. And again, I want you guys to think about this. If you were truly honest with yourself, we should set up a way to figure this out, Isaiah. It wouldn't be that hard. But during your lead generation time, how many hours are you sitting there like this? Okay, next. Right. The majority of your time is doing this. This is not a skill set that you're going to get paid for. You get paid for having the conversation. So how do I have more conversations? I call more people. How do I call more people? Multi-line dialer, or at a minimum, a dialer that's efficient and effective.
Absolutely. Because to your point, if you're tracking your metrics the right way, the more outreaches you have, the more conversations you're going to have. I'll kind of bring people underneath the hood here a little bit about how we track this. So if you look at January to February, we have a specific goal that we need to get our outreaches to be. We know what that is. It's not where it needs to be to hit our goal. But we're doing different things to work on that. We're implementing AI voice, AI texting. The dialer makes a huge difference. It's almost like we did the math on it. It'd be almost impossible to be able to hit our outreach goal if we weren't using a dialer today. And I think it's what's really interesting. If you look at these trends here, we on our dialer, we have in January, actually, hold on. This is tracking by week. So if you look at February, we had outreaches, 9,370 outreaches. So 9,370 outreaches. And connections. We connected to 11, or we connected and actually talked to 1,000 people. And so we can see our connection rate. And I'd encourage everybody to track this, because this is a big deal when you're dialing, because if you're not getting appointments, for an example, as you're dialing through, and there's only two reasons: you're either not talking to people, or you're talking to people and not getting an appointment. So let's talk a little bit about that. When you're making calls, right? What's interesting is this connection rate 5 years ago and 10 years ago. Brian, I don't know if you've seen a difference, but with your connection rate, we're happy with 10 to 12% connection rate, where we're actually having a conversation, with 10% of the people we're actually reaching out to. So I don't know if yours is different, but that's what we.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think the national average is around 8, to be honest.
Right.
So, no, that's fabulous. And, and we can go into this, but there's more to these numbers than just these numbers. And what I mean by that is, I don't know your exact process. We have some similarities, and we've spoken about it at a high level, but I'm going to guess that also inside those outreaches, you've got text messages, you've got video text, you've got emails, you've got other things versus just straight up calling a list. And honestly, that's what we used to do, right? Hey, give me a list. Bang, 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 bang. Okay, give me another list tomorrow. Bang, bang, bang. And it made sense because it was the most efficient way to actually do it. But that's not the most efficient way anymore. We can do things like voicemail drops before we call people. We can do text messages before we call people. So I love this. And, again, what is a 1% rate higher connection rate worth to you?
Right. That's why I wanted to bring. Thank you for circling back to that. That's why that was the original reason why I pulled this up. So, yeah.
Let me just go back to one other thing you asked, because I don't know that I answered the question. So if I paid $200 a month for a dialer, which by the way is relatively expensive, that's on the high end. That's $2,400 a month, or excuse me, $2,400 a year. So my question to everybody who's watching this, who's trying to decide whether they want to pay for a dialer or not, is can you get one more transaction with a dialer? Just one. Because most people, that will be more than 3. That'd probably be about a 3 ROI. I'm just doing that math off the top of my head. If you just had one more transaction, I'm not even going to talk about how much it saves you mentally. I mean, I know that seems like a little bit, guys. We only get X amount of energy, mental capacity on it.
Yeah.
How much are you burning up by getting frustrated, irritated, confused by your process? Because that's another thing that people don't do. I'm just going to do it this way. It's easier. I agree. For the next 15 minutes, it's going to be easier to do it this way. You and I are both Tony Robbins fans. I don't know if you did this when I went to a seminar that I did. We had to write our name out. Write my entire name out as fast as I could. Okay. So I'm writing my name out as fast as I could. My first name has 5 letters. My last name has 6. So I'm writing out 11 letters. Okay. Then they said to us, I want you to write out your name and skip every other letter. So basically, I'm writing half of what I did, right? And guess what happened? It was slower.
Right.
Because I didn't have process yet. But guess what? After I practiced writing my name for a very short period of time, then it got faster. This is what I need people to understand is when you change something, it's going to get slower. If you're measuring it going, that we decided to use this dialer and was actually slower day one. Good. That's what you should expect.
You should expect it. Yeah.
What are your systems of inefficiency, and are you willing to accept the short-term pain of changing to a better system? And it will be painful. I think too many agents are out there hearing this is going to be easy. No, it's going to be painful on the front end, but the reward is so high that you almost have to go through the pain.
Yeah, I love that, because I think that without that expectation, it's really hard to improve. I was just saying, my mentor says, Isaiah, old habits die hard, right? Like old habits die hard. So if you want to see improvement or see change or integrate anything new, you have to make sure that you're giving it enough time, enough repetition before you're saying it works or not. And I actually had this conversation today with with a client, and they were like, that we were working on a revival campaign, and they're like, yeah, this campaign's working really great. I'm like, oh, awesome. What's the response rate? And they're like 12.27 response rate. Now, granted, it was brand new, right? So like, it hasn't been a long time to even give the data enough time to finish the responses coming in over time.
Right.
But so it'll probably be better than that. But that's what it was at the time of me looking at it. And I said, oh, great. What are you comparing it to?
Yes.
And then there was a big giant pause. And I said, well, let's go look at other campaigns, other similar revival campaigns that you ran in the past. And we were looking at 25%, 35%, et cetera, different revival campaigns. But she wasn't aware of those percentages when she went to make the changes. She wasn't looking at what it was before in the past. And I think that if you're using it, like, let's say that this is the first time you're using a dialer, right? And you don't, to Brian's point, you don't get the results you think you're supposed to get off of that dialer. Well, number one, the lesson that I got here from hearing Brian talk is I need to make sure I have a clear idea of what my results were before compared to what they are after. And I need to be willing to test that out over an extended period of time. Everyone has a different rule of thumb. Our thing is we want to collect data over the course of right around 60 working days.
Okay.
So like where we want to actually see results over the course of 60 working days. And that doesn't mean that we're not making adjustments and not looking at things along the way. But before we determine whether something is working well or not, we like to see that kind of formula come to play, or what you would say a quarter over the course of a 3-month period, or 60 working days where we're actually using or trying the new thing. So I know everyone's got a different cadence. Some people that might be too long for them. Some people that might not be long enough. But, Brian, I'm sure, we're in agreement that most people don't test things long enough is the problem.
Here's a fun thing to think about. The first time you do anything is going to be the worst time, going to be your worst performance.
Yeah.
You think about it. Yeah. Everyone who's listening to this probably has a driver's license. Think about the first time you drove a car. Thank God I was on a country road in the middle of nowhere and didn't have anybody I could potentially kill because it wasn't good. And so, but
good point.
That's what we have a tendency to do in real estate. Well, I tried this once, and okay, so you did it badly, not because you're a bad person, but because how can you expect to, do something perfect the first time? And there are those people, granted, those people exist, but they're few and far between, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. And let's say they're not getting the results. Let's talk a little bit about that. Like, how do you get through that resistance of, let's say they're not getting the results in the first 3 days, 5 days? What do they want to look at? What do we want to, let's talk a little bit about that.
So I want to just get a little clarification for your question. What are we just determining as a result? Are we looking at answer rate? Are we looking at conversion? What are we looking at there?
I think that's a really good question, right? And that's what we should be asking ourselves first is the easy thing is to say, I'm not getting appointments, or I'm not getting people to talk to, right? So maybe we look at, I would say if somebody's used to getting or having getting 3 appointments or two appointments a day, and then they're on the dialer and they got 1 appointment, and that happened 3 days in a row.
Okay. Again, the first thing I'm going to look at is what's my number of conversations. So because for whatever reason, maybe I had bad data, and it happens, right. By the way. Ideally, we've filtered our data and it's perfect, but database management's not exactly the strength of most real estate agents. Let's just call it what it is.
Can we pause there for a second? I love this conversation because this is what happens. You'll load your geo data in the dialer or your FSBO data in the dialer, and you'll be comparing it to your internet leads or your past client pickup rates. Right? Or Sphere. You can't do that.
So yeah, each set of data should have a different answer rate. Literally a cold call list that you bought off of, I don't know, Cold Realty is going to have a different answer rate than your past clients, or at least it should. If it doesn't, then your
There's a
past
problem.
client. So, step one is you have to compare apples to apples. So I had a 10% answer rate with, circle prospecting without the dialer. What did I have the answer rate with the same set of data, or at
Right.
least a very, very similar set of data? What percent? Oh, I had actually a similar answer rate. Oh, I didn't think so. It's not that they're not picking up. It's just that I'm not converting them when they pick up, because that's the other thing that people do. They just throw the baby out with the bathwater. They're like, well, this dialer doesn't work because I didn't have any appointments. Yeah, but you had more conversations than you normally have. So it's not the dialer, it's you not having good enough conversations, or you calling a list that's a low intent list. So yeah, you got to look at the whole picture of the data, not just A and B. So you got to look at it all.
Awesome. That's great. We're kind of coming to the end here. We got about a 5-minute wrap up here for this particular live stream, and if you're listening on podcast for this episode. Let's just bring it back to the top, kind of summarize what we were talking about here. I think hopefully we convinced you to be using a dialer if you have a meaningful size database. I would like to know the statistic of people that have a database of 1,000 or more people, or 3,000 or whatever the number is, and say that they don't have time to contact their database, but then are not using a dialer. It'd be an interesting statistic to look up. How many people actually are using a dialer versus people that are not? So I think hopefully we've intrigued you about what a dialer could do for you if you're not using one. That's the first thing. The next thing is hopefully this conversation from a perspective of a takeaway is what the difference in the types of dialers versus like having a dialer where it's just one line versus 5, 10 line, and finding out what that balance is between quantity and quality. The next thing is make sure that you're measuring your results. That's kind of what this final thing is that you have a baseline of what you were doing before versus what the dialer can do for you. And the good thing is what I picked up from Brian is that for $50, $100, $200 a month, it's pretty dang easy if you're using dialer to get an ROI with it, because most of the time it will enhance your pickup rate 30, 40, 50, even 100 times what it was, depending on the data source, depending on the type of dialer and what you have going on. But if you're normally having 3 to 5 conversations in an hour, there's no reason why you can't have 7 to 10 conversations in an hour using a dialer if it's honed in the right way. So, Brian, any other takeaways that you can think of from this conversation, just to kind of summarize it?
I'm going to just add something instead of doing a thing. I want people to understand when you do a multi-line dialer, I didn't actually use one 5-6 years ago. And the reason I didn't was I didn't need to.
Right.
And I actually had this limiting belief was, well, I don't want someone to pick up and then, because honestly, I don't know if you guys know, but basically, let's say it's a 3-line dialer. They call 3 people simultaneously. If one of them picks up, it basically hangs up on the other 2 people. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. I had, like many people, well, I don't want to piss off these people. Well, here's the reality, guys. We're going to piss some people off, and it needs to be okay. And you're in sales, and you're going to piss some people off, but we have to get back up to that efficiency rate, because even if you're like, look, Brian, I don't want to have 10 more conversations a day. Great. Just have the same number of conversations you're already having in a third of the time. At the end of the day, if you don't want to have more conversations, like I'm having plenty, great. Get some of your time back. Either way, it's a more efficient way to do it. And I would say the one thing that's most important as we move forward in 2024 is the number of contacts, the number of reach outs to get a conversation has increased exponentially. And therefore, we have to figure out how to get more people having conversations with us. And this is just one of the pieces of leverage that I think the very successful people will use. And if you choose not to use it, I'm not saying you can't be successful. I'm saying that you're missing a huge opportunity to either have more closings or have more time. I would like both of those things.
I love it. I love it. So check out the different things that are on the market. I'd also highly recommend to make sure that your data flows back and forth between your dialer and your CRM. It's a major problem. If it doesn't, it'll create a lot of havoc. So make sure that works out. And I think it's a good place to leave it off. If you are interested in learning more about this, in the comments below, this checklist will be there. You can kind of use this as a guideline. Also, make sure that you're following Brian on his social media channels. He's putting out awesome information. Feel free to contact us in this group, in this chat, with any questions. And I'm looking forward to diving into step number 5 next week, where we get into gifting campaigns and, the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to gifting campaigns, some false beliefs with gifting campaigns. So that'll be a fun conversation, and how that affects your conversion rate, and how it affects your referral rates, and how it affects people coming back to you. So that's going to be a fun conversation next week. And thanks for everyone's time and attention. We would appreciate you get the word out here about our lead gen and conversion podcast and live stream. And with that, have a nice day, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everybody.